second take. I haven't worked myself into a snit this week, so let's get on with it. Someone is speaking in riddles and rhymes and not even doing it as a haiku, and you need to do it in Fortran, because Fortran's an actual math-based language. You can also learn how to write code for, I think it's called the Ferranti processor. I might use a link below to that. The English language is the English language. Thank you for acknowledging that. But waptek saying it just doesn't work like someone else's assertion is not proof. Counterpoint. Yes, I'm dismantling what you're saying. I'm parsing what you're saying, and I'm interpreting it, because you're going to be, in a minute, put in a puzzle and demand someone solve it. I'm more clever than you because I can speak in riddles. That's nice. And your complaint is that the legal system speaks in riddles? There are laws on books in many states, and actually in the United States government has to follow them, that in order to make it to where the legal system is approachable, there are a couple of rules. Depending on where you are, the judge legally is compelled to acknowledge whether or not they understand the law and whether or not they can articulate it in ordinary speech. A real simple one is seat belts are required in cars that are able to go over a certain speed limit, so that if you're in a wreck and you put on a seatbelt, your likelihood of survival is much higher by a certain percentage or whatever. Mandatory seatbelt laws went in place because it was shown to be safer and more effective. People complained about being uncomfortable. They made up bullshit stories about how you can't get out of the vehicle after a car wreck. Yes, certain kinds of car wrecks it's more difficult, so we have seatbelt cutters. But the laws actually have a reason for them to exist. But let's go on with what you're saying. Me saying something isn't proof. Well, no, but me being able to communicate is. So let's listen to your retort, second sentence. But, to me, but you don't have the ability, as I don't to you, to tell anyone what they stand under. The word understand does not mean you're being dominated by someone. I understand you doesn't mean I'm being dominated by you. You misusing the English language does not make it a new language and make it correct grammar or quantum. It means you're playing word games and trying to seem clever when you're a dumbass. The court systems no longer tolerate people doing word games, because unless you come into the room and literally they don't understand what you're saying and you can't speak English correctly, that they don't have a reason to accommodate for your speech pattern. If you are incapable of communicating, they can declare that you're incompetent and have a lawyer defend you as best they can, so that you have some sort of defense. Or in some cases, and this is limited, some cases were delayed several months or maybe even years because a person simply couldn't communicate. And this is the important thing. In most court cases, I'm just going to do this, the majority of the evidence that puts a person in jail comes from the person. If the person never talks at all, it's very difficult to prosecute somebody. And if you have a lawyer who's got their head out of their ass, a good lawyer, they won't let them talk, provide any evidence, and will defend them as much as possible. It's an antagonistic system. So the expression that you hear from lawyers just telling you shut the fuck up, they really mean it. Just stop talking. You're the only one who knows what happens, and most importantly, and this is a real thing, you're going to say something you think is completely rational and innocent, and it will be twisted. You have to learn that about the court system. So what happens is you have a public defender or some other kind of lawyer helping you, hopefully, and they explain to you, I'm going to speak for you when necessary, not always. But don't talk unless you've gone through with me. And that's how it actually works, okay? All right, now, why am I going off on this? People who do this quantum grammar syntax shit talk to a lawyer about it, and the lawyer is just like, I'm not going to do that. You're just wasting the court's time, and they're going to be aggravated. And that's legally a good reason to disbar me. So assholes interpret this as, oh, you don't know how to do this. No, they know how to do it. It's called wasting the court's time and losing your license to practice law. You can't lose a license to practice law if you're not a lawyer, so you can go ahead and do this shit. And you might even waste the court's time for a while. But what they'll do is eventually say, you're deliberately avoiding speaking English. This is an antagonistic behavior. You're not permitted to represent yourself, because if you were a lawyer, you wouldn't be allowed to represent you either. That's a very simple, straightforward hunk of logic. And that didn't exist until sovereign citizens and tax deniers, not tax protesters, started showing up in court and gumming up the works on purpose. They specifically said they were going to waste the court's time. So they caused these laws. It's not tyranny by the government from ancient times run by the English government. It's you fuckers causing these laws. Laws are reactionary things. People have written laws to prevent this kind of shit from flying in court because assholes like you did it. And I'm talking to the person posting this, saying Waptek does not have the ability, and neither does the commenter, to tell anyone what they understand. I'm able to discern what they understand, or more accurately, I'm able to call a spade a spade. David Wynn Miller impersonating a judge and lying about how the English language works is prima facie evidence of him doing it. Sort of like the sun being out, meaning that the sun's there and it's not a hologram. There is a point beyond which reality is much more important than you wanting to win a fucking argument on the internet. Similar to your chemtrail videos, I cannot make people believe anything. Counterpoint, I'm not trying to make chemtrail believers believe anything, because by definition, they are believers. That's not how it works. You're missing the point on purpose. Belief in something means that you will ignore evidence against your belief. That is the wording I use. When people say it's the truth, truth now is defined on the internet as a conclusion you've come to that you will defend till death, because it's become a religious or political position rather than based on facts. So we are now stuck with reality, facts, and evidence. I'm very comfortable with that universe. I'm not comfortable with your twisted up one where the sky might be purple and the people are running everywhere. I have no knowledge of myself or anyone I know consenting to anything orally or verbally written and spoken. You have no knowledge of anyone ever consenting, orally, verbally, written or spoken, as you say, consenting to anything. They've never signed a contract, they've never made an agreement, they've never said I agree to that, they've never made a promise to anyone. You've never met anyone who's made a promise. Now I'm going to ask you if you're a Christian. Now we have a problem. I swear on this moment that I believe that God exists, that Jesus died on the cross for my sins, so that I may be saved. A very simple statement that you can't make, because you're now saying, I know of no one who's ever consented, orally or verbally, written or spoken, or made an agreement. I guess you've always been, every time your girlfriend had fun with you, or your boyfriend, whichever you are, or whichever you like, you never were able to give consent. I didn't mean that. Oh, I'm pretty sure you didn't mean that, because I'm sure it never happened. But I'm gonna insert a mama joke in here eventually. You have no knowledge of anyone making or a written consent form is a contract, and a verbal one is called a verbal contract. The only possible explanation is that the people in charge do what they do by manipulating and by our silence. Now that one actually has some merit. So get together like we do in Portland every few years just for the purpose of flexing our rights, and tell the local city government, or maybe even the state, you will follow our laws because we're the people and we outnumber you bastards. We do that all the time here. People hate Portland, but you have to give us a little bit of credit. Every time they try to sneak something through that we don't like, we just remove it from the law and tell them, no, fuck you. We are ruled by consent. Even though most of us are too lazy to get off our dead asses and sign a petition or stand on the corner getting a petition signed so we can get something removed, we still have that power. Even if we don't exercise our rights, we still have them. People like you just want to throw up their hands and say, I'm just going to waste the time in the courtroom. I'm just going to practice this bullshit on the internet to make myself feel clever. You're not clever. Write haikus in binary and Fortran and come back to me. Don't talk to me about parsing grammar and syntax. Noob. The only possible explanation is people in charge do what they do by manipulating and by our silence. No. The other one is you're dealing with a country of laws that the people have decided they're willing to accommodate for because it does us some good, like having seatbelt laws. What is the root of the weed? How do I as a man be 100% correct in what I'm speaking other than math? Okay. Logic. Computers are run on logic, not math. They're able to understand our speech. They can even deep fake an Obama. They can do shit you can't. You can learn a lot from a computer. Why don't you learn to program and hack? Come back when you can do that too. And you still have to do haikus and poetry and Fortran and binary. Make them pretty, make them sexy. And it's not just math. And by the way, I'd like to point out that this quantum syntax, grammar, newspeak bullshit isn't mathematics based in any way. It is literally not math. It's pure logic. I studied pure logic because I had to. If you're going to learn how to write a piece of software, it's handy. If you're going to build a computer, it might be very handy. If you're going to design microprocessors, you have to study pure logic. You don't study logic, you defy it. You may have gone to prison. You may have had technology fail in your method. I have seen documentation of it working. No, you have not. You've seen salesmanship and brochures and testimonials. And when you actually look into it just a couple of layers deep, nobody's made this work in court because it can't work in court. Because what happens in the court is they say, are you capable of explaining this law? They'll actually do to you what a judge can be. I can make a judge do this. I want you to prove to me that you can explain this law that doesn't make any sense and make it rational. Because you're going to be making an opinion and it's going to be part of the court record. If you're not willing to take this law that was misprinted, this was in Eastern Oregon, if you're not willing to or able to parse this as a lawyer and a judge, it's not a law because you don't understand it either. I actually made a judge admit, no, this is probably a misprint and shouldn't be implemented. Case dismissed. I got someone to save having their property taken from them by the county because they want to invoke some bullshit law that was literally a mistype up from years ago. Nobody knows where the law came from. It got removed from the books. Never been reused or anything. Nobody had applied it. But I have a documentation where a judge asked the prosecutor for evidence the laws applied to an individual cannot be provided, so the case was thrown out. I just quoted that. Are you quoting my case? There are real occurrences where this has happened, yeah. But all the ones you're going to invoke are ones that aren't real. There's one famous one where a guy just walks out of court. And he was notorious for being extremely violent, but nobody on your side will actually show the videos where he becomes psychotic and violent. They let him walk out, place him under arrest, and put him in jail again. He never got out. He was prosecuted over and over again until he stopped arguing with whether or not the court had the right to prosecute him. He literally caused himself to spend almost 5 times as much time in jail because he wouldn't acknowledge the court's right to keep him in jail. So they just kept him in jail until he did. If you're going to defy the court can hold you a very long period of time, apparently, in some areas. How does one be correct in the communication where there are so many meanings for the same word? By asking the judge to demanding the judge tell you what the rule you're quoting means in this instance. Force the judge, this is actually legally allowed, to make a decision in the court within this case, what does this mean? And if the judge makes a mistake, he's fucking stuck with it. I use that to make sure I can't be charged with trespassing. I happen to be on a hunk of dirt, I can get away with it. It's not a technicality, it's a real thing. But the judge in the area isn't going to judge anything against me. He just throws it out and I just have to leave. I come back later anyway. I'm not telling you how it all works. Then we fail to give you closure of those meanings in any specific document. This life is not do what you are told or else. You are required to follow the laws within the state, the county, the city, and the country you're in because the rest of us have agreed to follow them. We, the people, made these laws. We, the people, have the ability to remove them. You, the individual, do not have the right to overrule us. We use the legal system to make sure that you don't violate our rights. Fuck you. That is a threat. Yes, it is. You will be punished chronically until you stop disobeying the us. U.S. Word games. No one should have to live this way. I don't fucking care. Make a utopia someplace else. Just my $200. Peace be with you. Fuck you and burn in hell. You want to implement your version of Shira law in my country? fuck you.